Hi, and thank you for attending this session. From NRG-Edge, we're a small company outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and we specialize in the financial industry. And as you know, over the last 3 or 4 years, ever since 2008, there's been quite a few challenges in that industry. And we're trying to give it a helping hand, if you will. And we're finding that Magnolia is a key aspect of that. So let me just mention the things that I want to talk to you about. I want to basically introduce the problem for you that is severe in the industry at this point. And that has to do with the numerous silos, if you will, that have come about mainly from lots of legacy applications and also from the mergers and acquisitions that have really happened over the last 3 or 4 years being forced onto banks and financial institutions because of the financial crisis, if you will. So we'll talk about how multi-channel banking really is a problem that can be solved by Magnolia. We'll talk about a platform tech stack that we as NRG-Edge have created that embeds Magnolia into the tech stack as a key solution component to it. And we have 2 stacks actually, because one is more related to the web channels and one is the native apps. The one that we're going to focus on in this particular session here is the native app one, and we also have a demo which I'm going to show you about how we actually manage content in an iPad app. And that's what we're going to do is give you a demo of what we're going to talk about here. Okay. All right. As I mentioned, the real issue here is that over time there's been a numerous applications that have been created for banks and financial institutions, marketing sites, online banking sites, and now recently iPhone apps, Android apps, and iPad apps now, of course. So what's occurred is that each one of these apps is really a silo. You know, you have one type of system that's doing the marketing site and perhaps the online bank, but usually it's 2 separate silos there also. And then you have a separate silo where you're doing the iPhone and the Android apps. And now you have an even further silo that is doing the iPad apps. So there's a clear need to integrate these solutions, if you will, have one common framework that exposes the services that each one of these channels, if you will, can use. And that also provides you a consistent and holistic approach to managing that content across all these multi-channels. And that's what Magnolia absolutely does for us. So what it really does is it provides that consistent customer experience. It allows us to expose RESTful services that then can be consumed by these native apps that can in turn be content managed, and provides really a single console, the Magnolia console, that we can send content to each one of these channels and manage it all from that single console. Okay, so the platform itself, which is the framework which embeds the Magnolia app in it, is really meant to be multi-channel, meaning that we can build iPad and Android apps on it, we can build iPhone and Android apps on it, we can build online banking on it, which is common, and then we can also do marketing sites on it. And again, the essence of the concept is that you have one console, one framework that supports all of this across the bank, if you will, or the financial institution. It could be insurance company or whatever you like. All right, so what is it that we manage really with Magnolia? It's the typical things: text changes, field label changes, links and documents, style changes, style sheets, We pull rates from banking engines on the marketing site, which is pretty simple to do. We enable promotional advertising like Adobe, Omniture, and Target. Again, the consistent thread here is that we manage it all through one console. Okay, so one of the big things that Magnolia allows us to do is that banks and financial institutions in general are very traditional type of industry, is a traditional type of industry that follows a typical waterfall method and so on. And when you do have to make a change, it's usually a programmer makes a change, then it gets approved. You create a WAR file, you deploy it, yada yada. And when you move the content changes to a Magnolia approach, it becomes much more simpler and much more controlled. You have the workflow process, etc. So it's a compelling proposition to banks. Well, here's a kind of an overview of how the whole stack works, if you will, at a high level. In typical financial institutions, you have the banking system of record, which is where the heavy lifting occurs, which is where the interest is posted, where the day ends occur, all that real kind of heavy lifting. On top of that, most typical institutions have some kind of SOA on top of this bank in order to allow disparate front ends, if you will, to communicate with those banking services. And what we've done is we've created a RESTful layer that sits on top of the SOA layer. Typically, SOA, the services available through SOA are typically not very granular. They're sort of coarse services, what we call them in the industry, which means you get a lot of things back, but they're not particularly friendly to somebody who wants to build a nice, quick front-end app. So what the RESTful layer does is it really granularizes these services to make it more efficient and easier to develop on top of it. And then we have both the internet and the intranet channel here. Obviously, the Magnolia console sits on the intranet channel. That's what you manage everything with. And we have an arrow going into the internet section there because the Magnolia console manages the internet apps directly, meaning that it publishes the content directly to those servers. However, with the native app, it's not quite so simple. With the native app, we actually embed the Magnolia application within the framework layer there, and it actually goes through that layer in order to update the content within the native iPad. You'll see more of it as we go forward here. Okay, so once again, the whole focus is really this one central console having a tremendous effect in being able to manage all the relevant online banking apps and native apps for a bank or financial institution. And generally, we call them Web Storefront, which is our moniker for the marketing site, if you will. Web online banking, that's your typical transferring funds, looking at your accounts and balances, etc. Of course, your mobile web, whether that be iPhone or Android, and your native apps, whether that be iPad, Nexus, Android. There's lots of different ones there also. Okay, so here's the online banking stack, if you will. So the thing to note here is that the Magnolia Web Content Management System actually sits within the user interface layer. As you can see, this is a typical MVC architecture, very standard, using Spring Inversion and Apache Maven. We have within the user interface layer for the online bank, that's where the Magnolia sits. That's different than the native app, which I'll show you in just a little bit. Okay, so what mechanism are we using to integrate? Let me go back to the prior slide quickly here. Yeah, one of the layers within the user interface is Apache Wicket. That's the UI layer web application framework that we've chosen. And what we've done is created a content provider class, if you will. And the content provider can return a resource bundle string for field labels and can also return a complete Wicket template. That's really important because this little div here is really very flexible and can return for you exactly what you need. All right, so what does this content provider look like? Here's a snippet of it. Basically, the identifier can be either a path or a UUID, and the content provider returns either HTML or plain text from Magnolia. Okay, all right, so here's how the tech stack differs for the native mobile, if you will. If you notice, the user interface, of course, is completely different. We no longer have the Magnolia application on the user interface layer, but now you'll see it within the services layer. And the reason for it is because when author publishes, we would go to the service layer to go ahead and update that content. On the user interface layer there, we're using PhoneGap, and that allows us to use native components, and with the Hogan.js templating engine and HTML5, it becomes very nice and convenient to be able to manage the content through Magnolia. And that's the reason why we chose those technologies, if you will. Okay, so the mechanics of integration for the native app is really Adobe PhoneGap. It gives us a lot of capability that we don't have to build ourselves. And using PhoneGap, we create a native app that uses HTML and JavaScript. It consumes the data via the RESTful content that uses core Magnolia components, and that's done via an identifier. We use Twitter's Hogan.js library, as I mentioned before. We chose that because it seems to work really well with PhoneGap. And the content service, as opposed to a content provider, can return a resource bundle strings for field labels in JSON format. It's basically the same process, just a little different, because we're implementing a service here as opposed to a native implementation, if you will. And here you have the same type of content service, same concept, if you will. And once again, the definition of the content service itself, this can create a path or a UID, and the content service likewise returns HTML or plain text from Magnolia. Okay, so at deployment time, really what we're looking at here is that you have a downloadable app, of course, that would be in the Apple App Store. And that downloadable app is made up of HTML5 and JavaScript, and also the native iOS components that would go along with it. It communicates to the RESTful services from our framework, and within our framework, then we have the Magnolia components and the custom business logic, which is what the application needs to go ahead and give the users what they're looking for in terms of functionality. Alrighty. So now we'll get to the fun part. We put together a little demo for you, which actually uses the console to make a content change on an iPad page, if you will. And then we're going to publish that content to the iPad app, and you'll be able to see it in an iPad simulator, which I have loaded on my desktop here. So So let me get the demo going, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, so here I have a Magnolia console, and it defaulted to the website. And if you notice here on the left-hand side here, we have the native tree defined also. And we only have 3 pages on it, and I'll show you what the pages would look like. So if I double-click on the login page, it's just a simple login, if you will. We also have basically an accounts list page where we retrieve your accounts and associated data. Anything that has brackets around that you see here, it's actually data that we cannot change. Like the account names come from the banking engine, and you certainly don't want your users to change that. Now, banks sometimes have functionality where you can create a nickname for an account, but that's not the case at this point. And the third page that we have here, which is actually account detail here. And again, we can change the hello here, but we can't change the customer name because the bank doesn't want you to fiddle around with your name unless you go to a particular page to do that. All right, so the way I'm going to show you this is I have a Xcode simulator here, which has been which I've set up here, and here's the same page in the simulator. Let's see if I can change it around to rotate right, I think. Yeah, okay, that looks prettier, right? Scale it? Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay, that looks better. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do the typical Magnolia work here, where actually we'll go ahead and take a look at this page here. Now, because this page is pretty simple, we've taken and put all the possible content changes into this editor here. So I'll just go ahead and change hello to welcome. All right. So you'll notice that, oops, if I could spell, we'd be in pretty good shape. Hang on a second. There we go. I think that's a little better. Okay. So we'll go to the admin central, and we'll see that the typical thing has occurred where the drum has changed to orange, and now we can go ahead and just activate the change, and we'll just say that we changed the greeting, and we'll say save. Activated the workflow. We'll go to our inbox, and because I'm a super user, of course, I can do everything, so that's always nice. And we can take a look at the page if we so choose. And it's fine. So, oops. Over here. There we go. Okay. So we'll just proceed the page through the workflow, and then if we go back to the native, we should see that the drum has changed to green. So in theory now, when we go over to the iPad simulator, we should be able to see the difference, if you will. So what I need to do first is log out, because the way this works is all the content changes take effect upon login. So once you log in, the refresh process occurs. Basically, the service checks for any content that's changed and updates the app at startup time. So we'll log out and log back in. And voila, we have welcome Adam. Now you'll be able to see that I can actually click on these. So you'll see that this is an actual iPad app so you can scroll through. It kind of mimics how an iPad app would work. If I scroll all the way down, I even have load more functionality. Or if I scroll all the way up, once it gets all the way to the top, it'll go ahead and refresh for you. Okay. So this is pretty powerful because there's not much of it going on out there, and it needs to occur, especially in the financial industry for sure. All right. So if I go back to the presentation, we are actually done. So we got about 7 minutes to spare here.
In fact, it's on the top level, it's an integration issue, and that's how you solved integration between content and your banking applications. If we address integration in a different way, the solution would look different.
Yeah, it's definitely an integration issue. I mean, we've created a framework that we feel will work appropriately for the needs of our clients, and we've tried to integrate Magnolia into it in the easiest, most efficient way that we could think of.
My question is about security. If you faced any issue with any security issue with Magnolia or with the integration you did, and if you had to discuss with the IT department or security department of the bank for solving some, I don't know, issues, getting some data from the very back-end systems of the bank and then exposing them to iPhone and iPad apps.
Yeah, as you guys all know, security is an incredibly important issue within banks, and that's a good point. Let me go back quickly to the stack here. I think I'll be able to show a bit more of what's going on here. Okay. Yeah, we have a pretty strong security focus here, and you'll notice at the top of the service layer there, we use Spring Security to secure all calls into the service layer. So that's really what the approach that we're taking. If you're interested in knowing more about how all that Spring Security works, feel free to stop by after this, and we'll chat more about it.
Just one other question. Is all the system hosted inside the bank or outside from an external external supplier?
Generally, the majority of our clients are hosted in a banking data center. We have a strong partnership with a large financial organization called Fidelity Information Systems. They're their largest financial provider in the world, actually. And they have a very large data center in Little Rock, Arkansas, in the U.S. So it's all behind their firewalls, et cetera, before anything even gets here. So yeah, the security is pretty good there. Yep. Yep. Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk here.